Hello. So I've been pretty busy with other projects that I have, so I haven't been able to do another one of these episodes for a long while. And in all honesty, things have been quite chaotic in the world, so I've been kind of paying attention to that. I think it's always important to stop and gain perspective on current events and see where the world is going. And I guess that's what brings me here again, because one of the conclusions that I get out of this whole current situation that we're experiencing as a society, now, and I speak in global terms, is the fact that we are losing the capacity to understand why free speech is so important. Now, I guess the way that I explain it is that we need to understand that speaking up is the most important thing we can do to preserve the democratic values that any society, at least from my point of view, should aspire to. And this is because the individual right of any person like you and me to think what they want to think and to have their own point of view is essential in order to have a free society. And in all honesty, what I'm here to talk about is the simple fact that now more than ever, everybody needs to speak up. But speak up in a different way that I think we're being told to speak up. Like when I was younger, I remember that I have this kind of like inflammatory sense of urgency about trying to change the world. Because I saw the things that were wrong about it and I wanted to make something, to do something about it. Now, of course, the essence of that feeling is correct. Everybody wants to improve the world, to make it better than it was. And yet, every single time that I thought I had a final answer on what it was that was important and necessary in order to bring change, I also realized that my positions were not necessarily the best ones or the ones that would create the positive shift that I was trying to get at. So that led me to the exploration of different ideas from different points of view. And as time has gone by, I guess I've matured in terms of what I think is right or wrong or what is the best way to address things. But what is happening right now in the world worries me because I believe that we are falling into one of the oldest traps that human beings can fall into, which is the idea that we are right. That we are so obviously right that we don't have to hear the other side of the conversation. And that because of that, debate, argument, and exchange of ideas are concepts that don't need to be taken into consideration in the way that we think we can build a better society. Now, for me, the best way to explain this is that reality in itself has never been changing. And it hasn't been changing in the sense that we're always trapped in the present moment. And this is not coming from a spiritual point of view, but what I mean is that the only thing that has been happening is that biological beings, such as human beings, are being born and then dying in a template or in a structure. No, it's not a structure. On a platform, and that this platform that we call the Earth is simply changing. That like the sense of linearity that we have in terms of time, that we're moving forward because years are going by, it's an illusion. Like imagine for a moment that right now we have a massive war and it sends us back to the Stone Age, and 2030, 2040, 2050 can be as, let's say, old as the 16th, 17th century. So time is an illusion in that sense, because we're not really going anywhere. It's just the advancements in technology, science, like general knowledge, that we are able to bring into reality that make any difference whatsoever in the way that things have been. And it is exactly because of that my perspective on how to bring about change is not what most people think that change is. And I guess that's because we have this sense of, there's this concept called teleology or eschatology, which means that everything is building towards like an endpoint, and that in that endpoint something will drastically change. And of course, the best representation of this idea is Christianity, because the idea is that, let's say, the whole history of humankind will eventually end in a teleological moment in terms of the apocalypse, the reckoning, and then that will be the end of everything in the way that we know. But this idea, let's say, that filters into secular points of view, meaning that we think that society is moving towards something, as if time and, let's say, the simple act of trying to move forward will bring about that future, as if the future was laid hidden in the years that are coming by. But that's just an illusion for the most part, because it's the decisions that we take, the ones that build the reality that we live in. And for me, the worrisome phenomenon that's happening is that people more and more think that the way to get to that future that they see is by shutting down the other side, because the other side is the problem. That's what's stopping them from getting to where they want to be. And people fail to see that this is the way that things have always been. There has always been two sides of one coin. And let's say that it doesn't matter where you fall. Let's say that you're a conservative person. So your role as a conservative person is to conserve that which you find valuable about what the past has brought forth all the way here to the present. Now, if you're a progressive person, you're trying to bring about change to the things that the structure that the past has brought forth all the way to the present needs improving or needs modifications. And the idea is that these two forces have always existed. It's not as if they're hang-ups of historical process. There will always be these two tendencies, because whatever change we want to bring, then we want to preserve it. So people that have been progressive people at a given point in their lives can become conservative people later on in their lives, because they're trying to preserve that which they brought forth. And the illusion that we can always the illusion that there's only one side of that equation that is worth hearing is what normally creates the polarization that we're seeing right now in the world, meaning that the more we think that only one side is correct, the more we push towards that side, and the less we recognize that the people that are quote-unquote opposing our views, or that are our opposites, are actually, in a sense, the people that are trying to preserve that which someone else brought forth to the world. So they're trying to preserve that which they find that is valuable. Now, the difference in opinions and ideologies will always be present, and it doesn't mean that what people always try to conserve is the things that should be conserved, or that what people are trying to change is always going to be a positive change. And that's the tricky situation that we find ourselves in as a collective. And I've talked about this before. I think that the best way to, let's say, have an interaction between these two aspects is to have debates, open conversation, free speech. Because the more you talk, the more you evidence your own gaps in logic, your lack of awareness of certain topics, your lack of knowledge on certain subjects. And that is okay. Everybody is supposed to be ignorant to the extent that we are limited, that we have a limited amount of time to understand like such a complex situation like reality itself or societies. But if we don't try to engage in that debate, and we convince ourselves that the only thing we have to do is shout louder and scream stronger than the other side, then what we're doing is we're fragmenting the structure that is providing that space for us to scream. And what I've been seeing is that a lot of people that call themselves progressives right now, which technically should be the force of change, are using the idea of progressiveness as an excuse for them not to have to listen to contrasting points of view. Which doesn't mean that they're wrong, but it means that they're being lazy about their own positions, and that they're having a salutary approach to the whole idea of how do we move forward. Now, the conservatives have always played the part of being too close-minded, not to want to accept any new ideas. That's when a conservative person loses their capacity to understand that reality is an ever-changing phenomenon. And the more we do that, the more we become calcified to new possibilities that may actually improve the life of everybody that implies our society. So, both extremes are trying to shut down the conversation, because both sides, what they really want is for nobody to question their point of view. And one of my favorite notions that I got from Alan Watts was the idea that the more insecure you're about your own position, the more you try to put it out there in the world in terms of the louder you are. The most insecure religions are the ones that try to convert everybody. Because the more people believe what you believe, the less you will find people that don't agree with you, and that will actually push you to understand if your own belief and position is correct or true. So I guess this whole thing is about not falling under the trap of thinking that we can shut down conversation, that we can shut down debate, that we can shut down our relationships with people and create a better world, because it won't. The only thing that it will cause is a fragmented society. And even if your quote-unquote side wins, there will be another side that is being repressed. And that will create another cycle of the same situation that you're living in right now, or that we are all living in right now. So the only solution that I've figured out in terms of this whole thing is that we have to speak up. We have to be able to say the things that we believe, even if they're not popular, even if they are not approved by our social circles, even if we know that they're going to spark a problematic conversation with somebody that we don't want to have a problematic conversation. Because if we don't do that, then we're silently agreeing with a position that we don't necessarily are in favor of. And more than that, it gives this false sensation to people that their point of view is true, just because we're afraid to say that they probably are not, or that maybe they're not. And that speaks a lot about human nature, of how we want to belong to a group. We want to belong to our friends. We want to belong to our family. We want to belong to our society. And in the name of that, sometimes we don't say the things that we think because we don't want to lose that. Because for the most part, ideas are not even comparable to a human relationship. We love our links so much that we're willing to compromise our positions sometimes. And I guess that's how any relationship works. You cannot always get what you want, but you can find a middle ground where everybody gives something to get something. And that's how societies also work. But imagine a relationship where you are only getting what you want and the other person is silently agreeing just because they're afraid that saying what they really think will make you angry, or will make you leave them, or will break up the relationship. That's not a healthy relationship, and it's not a relationship that can go really anywhere, that can evolve into something better. So the same thing happens at the societal level. We have to be able to not be seduced by that idea, not be seduced by, let's say, the comfort that we find in thinking that we are right because it is obvious that we are right from our subjective point of view. It is harder to admit that we are all wrong. And I will always say that we are all wrong. And that's how we move forward. We are all wrong, and between the conversations we find a little glimpse of what is better or what is right, and then we muddle through. But in order to do that, we have to speak up. And we have to lose that fear of that uncomfortable conversation or that problematic situation. Because if we don't say anything, rather, then we risk something way worse. And we risk losing everything that we fought, or that other people fought hard to get at, that fought so hard to get at. And that's it. Just speak up. Say what you think. Don't be afraid of anybody telling you that you're wrong. Because even if you are wrong, then you'll improve. And if you're not wrong, then maybe you'll give someone else a bit of perspective. And also, you will make somebody else notice that you're not alone in the way that you think. And that's how progress is always done. Remember that truth, or being correct, or being right about something, is not decided by a majority. The rule of the majority is not the same thing as being correct, as having truth. So don't fall for that illusion either. And that's it. I'll see you next time.